I want to talk about your personal Glean data pipeline. So ever since we started doing Glean, we always had the idea that it should be possible for anyone to use Glean and for anyone to run the whole Glean thing for their own thing without Mozilla's involvement. But currently, while you can use the client SDKs, the pipeline is a very complex beast. It starts with our client sending the data, goes through the ingestion, and then goes through several different services to finally get into BigQuery tables. And even those are very expensive to query because of the sheer size. And it requires a whole team here at Mozilla to actually keep this running and keep it up when we change things. And that's obviously nothing that you want to run on your own. But actually the thing that you need to run Glean is surprisingly simple. You need an HTTP server that can receive data and that conforms to the HTTP Edge server specification that we developed ourselves. And really all it takes is that you need to receive some data using a post or put requests on a specific path. And that path on your server already contains several things required to identify parts of the data. And what you receive in the request body is the ping itself. That might be gzip, so compressed, but that's basically the only thing. The ping itself is also very strictly and according to a schema that's defined by our JSON schema. Our endpoint currently basically just takes things in and then later validates that it conforms to a JSON schema. But really, you don't necessarily need to verify the JSON schema at any point. You can just store the data. The ping itself is like a JSON document that has several objects in there that are laid out in a specific way. And later tooling in our pipeline knows how to read this data and transform that into different things. Now, it's surprisingly easy to do this ourselves. Because it's just JSON, we can use an SQLite database, which actually knows about JSON, and start with just dumping the stuff into this database. Now, we already split this out into the different categories in our JSON ping and add a little bit of metadata that the Mozilla pipeline also does, but otherwise we're storing basic JSON text. Now, SQLite has an API to actually query this, and so we can just extract things like the client ID, which is stored in the client info part of a ping. And as you can see, I actually did this. And I currently receive data from over 1,000 different unique clients. Now you might think, what are those clients? Where are they coming from? What is the data they're sending? So I thought about what can I actually instrument? And a very first thing that came to mind is, well, we just had Glean.js built into websites. So why not do this for my own website? So yes, I am, I think, the second actual production user of Glean.js on a website, running on my own website since late January. And I have all of this data in a single SQLite database now and can query it. And now guess when I wrote the latest This Week in Glean post. Now, I obviously can do more analysis of this data. I can look by path. And obviously, the latest This Week in Glean is currently the most visited blog post on my own website since I started recording this data. Now, obviously, I didn't want to stop there. So what else can we instrument? Well, the next thing I thought about is, how about we use the Glean Python project? And what is the thing that I use quite frequently? It's Git on all our repositories, including Glean, but also a lot of my own stuff. So I simply wrote a little Python script that wraps around my Git implementation and records everything that I do in Git. So basically, it records when it starts, what command it is about to run, and then later records the time it took for that to run. This is obviously not the full script you see here. Like mine is, I think, like 30 or 35 lines. Because actually, if you wrap Git and then call Git in there itself, be very careful which Git you call, because otherwise you have no Git anymore to use. But regardless of that, so what does the data look like? Well, first thing, I can look at what commands I actually use the most frequent. Obviously, I look at the diffs that I create and then add that to the staging part of Git and eventually also push that. But there is a clear thing that I diff a lot. So what projects do I work on? Well, it turns out most of my commits, since I've been recording this since late January, were actually in the project that is doing all this work for me. But after that, there's a lot of Glean and UniFi stuff, which is currently the most I've been working on. And as one last thing, I thought, like, what else can we instrument? What other Glean SDKs do we actually have? And one Glean SDK we actually have is the one written in Rust and usable by Rust. So what can I instrument with Rust? Well, obviously the server that's receiving the pings itself can be instrumented using Glean. So every ping that gets processed, it will just record how long it takes to process that code. And again, be very careful when you write code like that, because every time it processes code and measures the time it takes, it also sends a ping, which triggers the same server. So it just needs to ignore its own pings, or it will just continue doing this stuff. So the server currently processed over 3,000 pings that I've been sending from my website, my Git, and the server itself. And because everything is just JSON, it takes a little bit more of SQL and JSON extract to get the data out. But then you get a histogram of the processing time that it took to process 3,000 pings. So all in all, a personal Glean data pipeline is certainly possible, and it takes less than a megabyte of storage to store data of 3 weeks from 3 different projects. So thanks.